time with me in District 7 recently. We saw the incredible work we're doing in the Joint Interagency Task Force. We saw the work you do from the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos. We spent some time together on the U.S. Coast Guard cutters Isaac Mayo and Bear. You were good enough to dangle me out of the back of a C-144. And I remember a young man named Kyle Suga, who was our boatswain's mate, BM1, who piloted that OTH boat up into the back of the Isaac Mayo and notched it up there pretty good. Not a bad day's work for a young man carrying the Coast Guard Commandant and the chairman of his oversight committee. And I want to ask you, sir, because I know you're a straight shooter and you care about your coasties, since you and I met first at Michael Kozlowski's funeral in Mahopac, New York. The president's budget would take $1 billion out of your capital plan, out of your PC&I. I'm not going to ask you to get into the, to opine on that, except to tell us, sir, what would that mean if we took at face value the president's budget request of $1.2 billion? What would that mean for the United States Coast Guard? What would you do?
Well, Chairman, first, thank you for spending some time with the men and women of the Coast Guard, and obviously, I think that had an impact on your awareness of what our folks do to support the security of the nation. Your question specific on the capital budget, sir, I would tell you the 2020 budget submitted by the administration here, forwarded by the Coast Guard up to the department, does focus on our key acquisition priorities. First and foremost, the offshore patrol cutter I mentioned in my opening statement. That'll be about 70% of our offshore capability when we build out that fleet of 25 cutters. There's the second offshore patrol cutter production funding. There's long lead materials for the third and fourth cutter in that class. The Polar Security Cutter Program. There's bridging monies, about $35 million. The 19 budget included a big lift of $675 million. If you look over about a 6 to 8 year trajectory on our capital budget as proposed versus enacted, we've been the benefactors of a lot of strong congressional support on Coast Guard acquisitions. But there's been a slight continuous uptick. 19 had that $675 million on top of that trajectory. 20 is an off year in terms of big funding for Polar Security as we get into 21, 22, 23. Our goal would be to build out 3 Polar Security cutters, the program of record, between now and 27, 28. So I think that some of that billion you talked to, sir, is accountable with the non-inclusion of $675 million for the Polar Security cutter in 2020. This is a bridging year. $35 million allows us to keep the program of record moving forward, program management. It's not a big amount of money, but I think, sir, we can stay on track with that.
And, excuse me, Master Chief, that young man, Kyle Suga, what he said to me on that boat that day was, what I like about the Coast Guard is, if you do your job, it takes care of its own. The Coast Guard takes care of its own, and the Coast Guard will have your back. What are your concerns about the retention and development of young men like that, your young coasties, when you look at this budget?
I'm glad you had a good experience with them. Our boat drivers are some of the best boat drivers in the world, and I'm thoroughly impressed with them every time I'm out with them as well. So, we're wringing every efficiency we can out of the training system. We could use assistance with operations and support funds. That's been fairly flat over the years, and we've, as the new assets come online and they're a little bit more expensive to maintain, we're having to find those offsets from other places, and they're coming from some of the places that affect our quality of life. And I'd like to be able to offer them a little better conditions for their housing, a little better opportunities for training, and just basically take care of their families a little bit better through more opportunities for daycare affordability, things like that. Those are the things that take away from their focus while they're at sea. So I want them to take care of their families and take care of their things back home and make sure they have everything they need to be successful so they can focus on the mission.
Thanks, gentlemen. Admiral Busby, we have a terrible shortage of mariners in this country. What should we be doing to fix that?
Sir, the most direct way we can fix that shortage is by having more ships at sea for them to be employed. Quite simply, that's how we're going to grow our mariner pool. They have to have someplace to work. So we have to have a larger fleet, be it Jones Act fleet and internationally trading fleet, to have employment places for those mariners to practice their trade and to be promoted.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Gibbs.
Thank you, Chairman.